Hello, my name is Michelle Richardson. Um, I have homeschooled for a long time. My son is 30 and we started when he was 6, so 20 some years. My husband is JP and we have 7 children, and we just graduated the 6th of our 7th child. So um, she said to take 10 minutes or so to go through just the way we've homeschooled in high school. So I've never done one of these before, so it's kind of distracting seeing myself. So I'm just going to try and ignore myself and go on with this. So anyway, so our goal for high school, for all ages really, was to create lifelong learners that had a thirst for learning. I'm kind of an unconventional homeschooler. We didn't use a lot of curriculum. For some kids we did, for some we didn't. And I just want to put out there right now that even after I've graduated 6 children, I do not feel like I'm an expert. We learn new things every year. Every child is different. So these are just things that we've done. You may agree with them. You may, vehemently disagree with the way we've done things, but it's just a glimpse into our homeschool and how we did it. So I'm gonna have to use my glasses here. So my first 2 children, we have 7 children. Our first child is my stepdaughter. So she went to public school. So I'm not including her here in this particular talk. My next child was a boy who was very academic, loved school, a dream to teach. He was just a lot of fun. He loved learning and loved school and loved sitting in chairs and reading books and textbooks and all that stuff. So then I got to my 3rd and 4th child, and no, that just was not going to happen at all. So I tried to find interesting and fun curriculums. This is in high school, trying to find things that would be interesting to them, and it just felt like nothing was working. We were Charlotte Mason, kind of Charlotte Mason-ish homeschoolers when the kids were young. So we did a lot of narration, and we would go through something. I'd work for an hour trying to teach them stuff, and they just couldn't tell me anything really, or not much at least. I felt like I was spending my days literally shoving information into them, and they weren't retaining any of it, or not much of it at least. And I was literally felt like I was trying to fill a bucket and not light a fire. And I just thought, what is the point of this? We're spending all this time on curriculums that worked for my oldest son, like Apologia, for instance. Great curriculum. The next 2 didn't care for it at all. So I decided that we needed to do things differently. And that was hard for me because I was a teacher. And so I liked also sitting in my seat, reading curriculums, writing answers to questions and things like that. And these boys just learned so differently from me. And I realized that there's a lot of different ways to learn the information. It doesn't have to be one way. And these boys were funny because although they couldn't recite back to me maybe some of the stuff that they had learned, they could tell me how to skin a rabbit. They could tell me some of the physics of skateboarding. I had one that was extremely creative and could make up stories on the fly, jokes, things like that. And one that could show us how to take things apart and put them back together again. So I knew they were smart boys. They were intelligent. I don't know if you've heard of the 7 intelligences, but it's not just school intelligence. There's a lot of different kinds. And that was them. So I'm thinking, what's the point? Let me just stop and just tell you a little story about my 3rd child, who was a boy. Loved skateboarding through junior high. Late elementary, junior high, went skateboarding all the time. And he would come home and tell me all these stories about skateboarding, like tricks and blah, 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 blah. It was so boring to me. And trying to be the good mom, I listened and, tried to be interested, but I just wasn't. My eyes would roll back in my head and I would glaze over. I didn't hear half of what he was saying to me. So when he was in high school, I don't know, it must have been his sophomore year, we were talking about that and we were laughing about it. And I just said, I literally couldn't understand what you were saying. It just was like, it just went over my head and it just was so uninteresting to me. And he said, well, Mom, now you know what school is like for me. Man, that was like a knife to the heart. I just thought, I'm not going to let this happen. I'm going to let this kid, I don't want this kid to feel like he can't do it, like he's not smart. So I changed my methods a little bit. I always was kind of a relaxed homeschooler, but I became more relaxed, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word, but so I decided to make a change. We decided to do more following their interests and their God-given gifts. I mean, why fight that, right? Um, my students, as they got into high school, had a large say, probably the largest say, in what they wanted to study and how they wanted to study it. I tried to work with them instead of against them. We used a lot of discussion. I think discussion is not used enough. I mean, everybody uses all kinds of other methods to get their kids to respond, but really discussion was a great thing for us. We had wonderful discussions. I saw myself as more of a resource instead of handing down the curriculum and telling them what they were going to learn this year. I saw myself as a resource. We sat down and talked about their goals. What were some things that they wanted to learn this year? Sometimes we did use curriculums, but I always kept the curriculum secondary to the child. So for instance, we did a kitchen chemistry class with my daughters a couple years ago, and it was a lot of reading. Now, they like to read, but they don't want to read 50 books. They'd rather self-select their books. So we just cut down on that area. We just adjusted the curriculum to what worked for them. We did a lot of the hands-on activities. We got together with another family. So we used a lot of the videos and less of the reading. I did a lot of journaling. I started watching my children and just writing down things, maybe random things that didn't seem like they would be important. I started writing those things down, and or I would have them, they kept journals and they would write down things they were doing, things they were thinking. You can't always tell what someone's learning on the inside by watching the outside. So some of it comes down to trusting that your child will follow the path that God has for them. So I'm going to give you some examples of things that we used in our homeschool, and you can use this or not use it. It's just things that we did. One thing I want to caution some of you about is that because I'm not controlling so much what they learn as much, they might be exposed to more things. We saw that as an opportunity for discussion. And we had some great talks about things that maybe weren't quite so, I mean, of course we didn't let them do whatever they wanted to, but sometimes when you're researching on Google or YouTube, or you've got mentorships or things like that, things will come up, and we just use that for discussion. So again, it's kind of about trusting our children. So anyway, so history examples. We used a lot of historical fiction. I read aloud to my children all the way through high school. We used timelines and timeline books. The Kingfisher History Encyclopedia was good for us. We watched a lot of movies for history, and a lot of you might say, well, some things aren't accurate, but I don't know how your family is, but our family Googles everything after a movie, like how much of it was true? Did this really happen? Who were the actors? Things like that. So again, great opportunity for discussion. If it wasn't exactly, if the movie didn't portray things exactly accurately, it was a great way to find that out. My boys just recently, my second oldest son and my youngest son, talked about the importance of video games. But we didn't play lots of video games. We had a few, but most of them, my husband is a huge history buff. And so we had a few history games, and I wish I would have thought to ask them specifically what those were before I got on here, but I forgot. But my second oldest son was telling me, he's like, Mom, I learned so much from video games, because they did actual battles. You would learn about all these, not just the war, but all these different battles. And so that was a great thing for them. They learned a lot of history. My boys all love history. My husband likes to do miniature wargaming. So they did a lot of miniature wargaming, and we played board games. We have, as you can see behind me, that's 2 shelves. I probably have 8 shelves of books in my house. So we have series like History of Us and things like that they can research. And there's also Google and YouTube and, the History Channel and things like that. It doesn't all have to be read. There's a lot of different ways to learn. We took lots of trips. My husband works in the morning for Delta, so we get free flights. My oldest son, who lives in New York City, and my daughter, who just graduated, and I went to Europe last year, and we visited all kinds of World War II museums, and we visited the American Cemetery, the German Cemetery. We went to the Anne Frank Museum, the Eiffel Tower, the Reich and the Louvre museums. We went to the hiding place. We went to Versailles, and we checked out the Roman ruins in Trier, Germany. We went to a concentration camp in Holland. And then my youngest daughter and I went to visit my oldest son in New York City, and we went to the World Trade Center Museum. We saw the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. We went to the Empire State Building and Times Square and Coney Island. And I'm telling you, my daughters got more history, more geography in those few weeks that we went on these trips than probably anything else in their high school. And it will mean so much more to them. We had read The Diary of Anne Frank before we left. We talked about Corrie ten Boom and read her book. So you might not have that opportunity, although you could probably go to Delta and get a job in the morning. It's hard sometimes, but it's been great. My youngest son went to Iceland. He and my husband have visited battlefields, one in Missouri. They also went to Europe and went to Bayeux to see the tapestry and World War II things. So, but there's like the Jordan House right here in Des Moines for the Underground Railroad. And like I said, the battlefield in Missouri, there's things that are closer by that you could go check out. So trips are a great thing. My kids used library books, and honestly, they used a lot of children's books for things that they didn't know very much about. I don't know if any of you watched Jeopardy, but the big winner, Jeopardy James, that was on earlier this year, he prepared for it by reading all children's books. And he just said, I don't know why more people don't do it. There's so much information without being overwhelming. So that's a thought. They used a lot of Google, YouTube, and then, of course, other resource books we had around the house by Albert Marin and Winston Churchill, and biographies, missionary stories, things like that. For science, we did a lot of nature study growing up, and even into high school, took nature walks. We still do that now with my high schoolers. Research a lot of things on YouTube. We were just researching elm trees because we were trying to find morels. So we did that on YouTube. We did use Biology 101 and Chemistry 101 with library books for some of my kids. A curriculum, I don't know if it's very used anymore, but my oldest son, who went to the University of Iowa and had 3 majors, loved lyrical life science, something he used in junior high and high school. And it's just, it's biology set to music, folk songs and stuff. So even in his college classes, he said, I would run the folk song through my head for different, tests or whatever he needed. So don't think things are too young. We used everything, things that were really difficult, things that were easier. So I know most of you probably can identify with the fact that we've learned so much that we didn't learn in school, even when we're teaching our elementary students. So, knowledge is knowledge. You don't need to put it on a hierarchy all the time. We used Guest Hollow, Chemistry in the Kitchen for my daughters. I discussed that a little bit. The family that we did it with, their kids like to read for information. My kids love the videos, and there was both. And then we got together to do a lot of the kitchen experiments, all of the kitchen experiments actually. So that was fun. But we pared it down to what worked for us. We used microscopes. One of my sons loved to fish and hunt, and he dissected a squirrel and we ate it one time, and he dissected fish and all that kind of stuff. We used to live in the country, and we had a lot of cats. We watched cats mate and have babies and talked very openly. We had the sex talk with our kids starting when they were young. So we never had to have big conversations about it because it was just there all along. But we did talk about things that they wanted to know as they got older. Again, library books, children's books, Google, YouTube, gardening. For English, my kids kept journals. They did story writing. We did a lot of Shakespeare. We used to be in a Charlotte Mason co-op when they were younger that exposed them to some Shakespeare. And then as they got older, we did more. We watched the Liz Taylor, Taming of the Shrew. We used movies for a lot of Shakespeare. We love the Kenneth Branagh movies for Shakespeare. You need to preview those first if you are concerned about, there might be some things that you might think, your family might think is inappropriate. We went to the play Romeo and Juliet down at the Simon Estes Theater. We read the Shakespeare stories. Before we would watch a movie, we would read, I don't know if you have ever heard of Leon Garfield has the Shakespeare stories. It's like a book, and it's like reading a narrative before you get to the plays, because plays sometimes are kind of hard to read. For literature, we used a lot of books and movies. Again, you don't have time to read all the books. And then we would do our literary analysis. You know, we would discuss plot and character analysis and setting and all. We would have deep conversations. And we followed authors such as British authors, Charles Dickens, J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Jane Austen, Sir Walter Scott. We read Ivanhoe. We read Once and Future King, Lewis Carroll, George Orwell. Many of these we read together because it's so conducive to discussion. But I did have my kids read other things as well because I wanted them just to read. We studied American authors, Jack London, Mark Twain, Louisa May Alcott, Uncle Tom's Cabin, Last of the Mohicans. We read Robert Louis Stevenson and Kenneth Grahame, who are Scottish authors. We read Gilgamesh, Beowulf, Canterbury Tales, Dante's Inferno, the Odyssey and the Iliad, which were my boys' favorites. They loved the Odyssey and the Iliad. We did poetry because we were Charlotte Mason all the way through high school. We would study a poet every few weeks, every maybe 6 weeks. Rudyard Kipling, Robert Frost, Carl Sandburg, Edgar Allan Poe, Emily Dickinson, Longfellow, Walt Whitman. For spelling, I have some that are excellent spellers and some that were just not very good spellers. We always did a spelling kind of program, like workbooks. We tried Spelling Power. Those that were good spellers remained good spellers. Those that weren't, they didn't really get too much better until, some of you may not agree with this, but until they got social media accounts. It's amazing what a little peer pressure can do. They didn't want to be embarrassed in front of their friends, so they would come and ask me how to spell a word, and I would give it to them. Or, with autocorrect, it would show up, and they would learn that way. Sometimes they would look it up in a dictionary, but probably not as often as they should have. I have a daughter, my youngest daughter, who feels like she wants to do more writing this year, so we are going to do IEW. So like I said, it's not that you can't use curriculum, but it's kind of, when the child comes to you and says, I want to do this, then you can offer some different choices. She also wants to do health this year and chose to do the Trim Healthy Mama health curriculum that's out. So I ordered that for her. For math, boy, my oldest son was really great at math. And then my next one, the one that didn't like school, we went through 3 algebra programs and he was in tears, hated it. We kind of, for all the rest of my kids, we kind of settled on teaching textbooks. And that worked really well for most of them. But honestly, a lot of that stuff that they will need, they'll learn as they need it. He ended up he went through the apprenticeship for ironworking and was at the top of his class for his math class because it was a lot of measuring and it's stuff that made sense to him because it was practical. So I just stopped worrying so much about things. And then we had different supports for our kids periodically. My one son that's a Marine needed a little help with math, so we got him some tutoring so he could do better on the ASVAB for the Marines. We did co-ops. My oldest son dual enrolled. Nobody else has dual enrolled until my daughters last year so they could do cheerleading. They had jobs. The boy I was telling you about that's the iron worker, he was basically running a Subway store by the time he was 16. If somebody needed money, he's the one that had to get into the safe and get the money. And that was really great for him because he's a hands-on type learner. And they did apprenticeships. We had several kids that did apprenticeships. So let me see here. I've got all these papers. I guess basically what we did in high school is we followed their interests. I mean, it's ridiculous for us. It was ridiculous to fight against who they were. There were some things that maybe I pushed a little bit harder on, saying, I really think you should probably try this or do this. But they were open to it because I respected their learning style and just who they were as a person. So I kind of told you what we used in our class, in our high school, but I just kind of want to go through with you just briefly. I'm not going to specifically name my children, but just some of the things that they were interested in, that we followed their interests with. So I have one son that loved music. He took 1 year of piano because that's all he wanted. He wanted to learn theory. Now he, also in high school, he bought the Ableton Music computer program where it has the tracks, all the different tracks. He learned that. He spent hours and hours writing music and laying down tracks. He took 3 years to do, he started in high school, started doing construction. He's been doing that for 3 years. He was recently invited to take the test for firefighting school. And so he's thinking he might go that route. And also he might also pursue music production. But at this point, we don't require our kids to go to college. He's saved a lot of money not going to college and working. And I gave him credits for music. I mean, my goodness, the time that he put into this, I gave him credits for music. I have a son that went to the University of Iowa. He graduated with 3 majors. He enjoyed curriculum and did a lot of curriculum. He's very musically talented. So he took piano since he was in junior high probably, and he was in show choir and was a singer, and now he's an accompanist and singer in New York City. He taught himself graphic design, and he does that for a genetic testing company, and he's ghostwriting a book. I have a son who has always wanted to be a dog trainer in the Marines. So he was into physical fitness, and he took a lot of time to train our dogs. He loved movies and drama. He took drama at the network, and he loves politics and went to Teen Pact. The reason I'm telling you this is I'm telling you that I'm not saying these things to brag about my kids. I'm showing you that we followed their interests, and their interests has led them to things that they wanted to do with their lives. These aren't in any order, by the way, oldest to youngest, and I mixed them up a little bit. My one son that was kind of my guinea pig after my 2 that were a little more academic, he was the one that went fishing and dissected squirrels. We gave him lots of nature time. The kid can tell you anything about nature you want to know, plants, animals. We let him take things apart, put things back together again, sometimes. He hated math in high school, but he ended up at the top of his class in his ironworking apprenticeship program. And now he has a family, has 2 little boys, and he's doing very well and supporting his family and goes hunting, and it's who he was meant to be. I have a daughter, the one that just recently graduated, who put hours and hours of research into photography through YouTube and Google and mentors and some DVDs that she got. She bought her own very nice camera, and she was able to do her very first videography job for a wedding just recently. So that was really exciting to her. She's gone on many, many mission trips, and she kind of wants to pursue missions. So she's going to be doing YWAM, not this next year because she's going to be has a full-time babysitting job to earn money. She'll be going to YWAM after that, and then hoping to set up her videography, photography business. And then our youngest daughter, who's not yet graduated, is into all things horses. Since she was a little girl, has wanted to do stuff with horses. So we got her a horse when she was 11. We pay for the board, but she has always had jobs cleaning puppy pens, being a barn hand, helping with lessons in order to pay for shots and hooves and injuries and things like that. So she has had an apprenticeship literally since she was about 6 years old with a family friend who is also a homeschooler, and they have their own stables now. She's been taught to do basic medical procedures on horses, and she's involved in 4-H and horse shows. So all that's to say that we just basically followed our kids, tried to follow their interests, their gifts. So you're probably wondering, well, how do we give grades and all that kind of stuff? What I started doing was just journaling, and I was constantly keeping notes. I like to write, so I thought that was fun to do anyway, but I was always watching my kids, and I started watching them closer. What are the things that they're doing? Like I said, sometimes you have to really kind of watch to see what they're learning, because they don't talk about it all the time. So I kept journals and lists all 4 years. And then I combined those to make classes. Like, for instance, so we studied poetry all 4 years of each child's homeschool, high school. We also did Shakespeare every year. We watched movies and read books, some of the books I was telling you about. So I put those together to make classes: British literature, American literature, writing, creative writing, whatever. Biology, chemistry, all those things that, math. And if I had some kids that didn't do as well, then we just did math 1, math 2, math 3, math 4, general math, something like that. Oh, my kids also all took consumer math, which I highly recommend. My daughter just got done taking it at the network, and just highly recommends it. She said she learned so much. And several of my children took the Dave Ramsey personal finance course for teens, also highly recommended. As I said before, sometimes kids will want to take a curriculum, and that's okay. If they're a curriculum type of kid, that's fine, just make sure that you use the curriculum for the child and not the other way around. If you're a teacher like me, if you're a family like ours, if you're a family that goes through the curriculum and that works best for your family, then do that. Help your kids decide what their goals are, and then help them by being a resource. We knew our kids needed 3 years of science, so we kind of had that in the back of our mind. How can we take the different things they're learning and put those into categories so that we can have classes? And like I said, my kids did use Biology 101, which is a video series, Chemistry 101, which they enjoyed. And then we just supplemented with books and experiences and things like that. In our homeschool, college is not required. We remind our kids very often that there are many ways to learn, not just the school way to learn, not just sitting in a desk, and also that they're going to be learning their entire lives. My son that hated school the most, who's the iron worker now, is totally a self-learner. A couple years ago, he was totally into head transplants. I don't know why, but he was totally into that. He would talk my ear off about things that he had seen and read on YouTube, and if it was possible. And I'm telling you, he learned more science through that. I mean, it was just great. He researches firearms, and he and my younger son were watching all about the rocket launch the other day and explaining that to me. I'm so glad that we chose to follow his lead, or their leads, instead of forcing them to do things that they weren't learning from anyway. When you spend so much time as a teacher, I'm sure some of you can relate, so much, I was a teacher. We were taught to make lesson plans and have this, great lesson for these children. When you take all the time to do that and they're not getting it, they don't learn it anyway, it started to feel like it was a pride issue on my part. You will learn. I took the time to make this lesson plan and you're not learning. And I really had to humble myself and say, okay, this is not how God made them. And I'm the one who needs to change. And I can help them learn by using a different method. And a reminder that you can't always see all the learning that's going on inside of a person. So that's it for me. I have a quote that I absolutely love, and it's by Albert Einstein that I just want to leave you with. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid. And I just pray that we will never allow our children to feel that they're stupid, that we will help them to see the beauty and the interesting things that are in the world. So thank you for listening. Thank you for having me, and have a great day.